Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 Board of Supervisors meeting. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Christie.
Here.
Supervisor Grijalva. Here. Supervisor Hines. Supervisor Hines. Supervisor Scott.
Here.
Chair Bronson.
Here.
Let the record show Supervisor Hines is not here. All other board members are present.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to be led today by Supervisor Christie.
Please join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Supervisor Christie. And now we will go to the land acknowledgement statement. Dr. Octaviana Trujillo, Professor of Applied Indigenous Studies at NAU, will read the land acknowledgement statement, and she recorded it by video.
Chanea, Cachemalea, buenos días a todos y todas. Good day, everyone. I am Octaviana Valenzuela Trujillo, Emerita Professor of Applied Indigenous Studies at Northern Arizona University and former chairwoman of the Pascua-Yaqui Tribe of Arizona. I was born and raised in Guadalupe, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix. I came to Tucson in 1985 as the first director of the Tucson Unified School District Native American Studies. My first academic appointment was at the University of Arizona, Department of Language, Reading and Culture, and American Indian Studies. Currently, I am an Indigenous Education faculty member with the Tohono O'odham Community College. They have a special National Science Foundation STEM project that I'm working with the entire faculty at Tohono O'odham Community College. Currently, I'm an advisory board member for the Alianza Indígena Sin Fronteras here in Tucson, and a Soros Equality Fellow working with indigenous peoples along the U.S. and Mexican border to really provide protection and access to sacred sites and gathering grounds. And I have the privilege in making the following statement. On behalf of Pima County residents, we honor the tribal nations who serve as caretakers of this land from time immemorial and respectfully acknowledge the ancestral homelands of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the multi-millennial presence of the Pascua-Yaqui tribe within Pima County. Consistent with Pima County's commitment to diversity and inclusion, we strive toward building equal partner relationships with Arizona's tribal nations. Chokutesia, muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe Supervisor Scott, you wanted a moment of personal privilege?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Last Thursday, I attended a public meeting of the Pima Tucson Flowing Wells Business and Neighborhood Coalition. This is a group that was formed so that business owners within our community could express their concerns about the issues of homelessness and some of the behaviors of some within the homeless population that have negatively affected their businesses and their operations. The purpose of the meeting was for business owners to speak publicly about the problems that they have been dealing with, and I went to listen and to learn from all of the business owners who presented there. At the end of the meeting, one of the organizers, longtime Flowing Wells School District Board member Kevin Daly, asked if there were any elected officials who wanted to say anything. I said that I reiterated to the crowd that I had come to listen and to learn, and that I was committed to continue doing so. I also indicated to everybody that I was committed to collaboration with everybody in that room and everybody within our community who cares about these issues and finding solutions to them. Collaboration between the public and private sectors, and collaboration between governments, perhaps especially between the City of Tucson and Pima County. I also said that it was important, as we're dealing with these issues, that we stop talking at each other and that we stop talking past each other. Madam Chair, I am aware of the contradiction and the contrast between what I said at that public meeting last Thursday and the tone of some of my remarks at our last board meeting when we were discussing the preliminary after-action report on the primary election. I will always stand up for our employees and volunteers and against unfair or unwarranted criticisms of our election systems, but I can do so without the anger and resentment that was occasionally evident in my remarks on September 6th. It's not the first time that I've regretted the tone and tenor of my remarks. I will try to make it the last. We have a great many important and potentially contentious issues to take on in our community. We must do so with less rancor, at a lower volume, and with a commitment from all of us to learn from and listen to each other. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We do have a number of changes to the agenda, to the regular agenda. Item 4, or page 4, item 13, County Administrator. The county administration is requesting that this item be continued to the meeting of November 1st. Again, that's page 4, item 13, regular agenda. And then on page 5, item 17, unfinished business contract, there's a correction to the funding source. It should read the contingency fund, not the county administrator's fund, just contingency fund. If there are no objections, the agenda is so amended. All right, we're going to move on then to the I'm sorry, I was going to forgot all about pause for pause. Let's pause for pause.
Hi everybody, my name's Monica Dangler. I'm the director here at Pima Animal Care Center. And today for Paws, I want to introduce you to my friend Remy. Remy's about 3 years old. He came to us as a stray, but he knows all the tricks. He knows sit, paw, give me a paw. Yes. And he even knows down, all the way down, all the way down, almost all the way down. Right now at PAC, we're still in code red. We have 500 dogs in the shelter, so we are still continuing our preventing euthanasia list. What that list is a list of dogs, just like Remy, that we think would fit into most any home. They're friendly with dogs, they're friendly with people, they're just all around easy to place dogs. And we're hoping that we can get these easy dogs out to make space for those dogs that do require a little bit more resource from us, whether it's for behavioral reasons or medical reasons. So please come down to PAC. If you can't come down and foster or adopt, please share our posts to your friends and family who might be looking for a dog. We have over 500 and we have something for everybody. And if you need cats, we've got cats too. So come on down to the shelter and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.
All right, and for those who are here from the U of A band, head on down to PAC and bring a friend home. All right, thank you. Now we'll move on to our presentations and proclamations. Item number 5 on the regular agenda, presentation of a proclamation to Dr. Shannon Roberts, Chief Executive Officer, Diaper Bank of Southern Arizona, proclaiming the week of September 24th through October 2nd to be Diaper Need Awareness Week. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? If not, Supervisor Scott will present the proclamation. And you want that box filled up before we leave, right?
That would be great. Good to see you, Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Whereas diaper need, the condition of not having a sufficient supply of clean diapers to keep babies and toddlers clean, dry, and healthy, can adversely affect the health and well-being of babies, toddlers, and their families. And whereas national surveys and research studies report that one of the needs families struggle with diaper need, and 40% of families delay changing a diaper to extend its life. And whereas infants and toddlers go through 6 to 12 diapers a day over the 2 to 3 years that they wear diapers, and purchasing enough diapers that are clean can consume 14% of a low-wage family's post-tax income. And whereas a sufficient supply of diapers is generally an eligibility requirement for babies and toddlers to participate in child care and quality early education programs that enable children to thrive, and whereas without enough diapers, babies and toddlers risk infections and health problems that may require medical attention, resulting in medical costs, and parents may be prevented from accessing child care needed to go to work or school, thereby destabilizing the family's economic prospects and well-being. And whereas the people of Pima County recognize that diaper need is a public health issue, and addressing it can lead to economic opportunity for families and communities and improved health for children, thus ensuring all children and families have access to the basic necessities required to thrive and reach their full potential. And whereas while experiencing double, triple, or greater increases in demand due to the pandemic and economic shutdown, diaper banks continue to do everything in their ability to increase distributions and support children and families in need of an immediate assistance. And whereas Pima County is proud to be home to trusted organizations, including the Diaper Bank of Central and Southern Arizona, that recognize the importance of diapers in ensuring the health and economic stability of children and their families, now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims the week of September 24 through October 2, 2022 to be Diaper Need Awareness Week, and thanks diaper banks, their staff members, volunteers, and donors for their courageous service during the pandemic, and encourages the citizens of Pima County to donate generously to diaper banks and diaper drives and support those organizations that collect and distribute diapers to families struggling with diaper need. Would you like to say anything? Thank you. Dr. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, esteemed Board of Supervisors. We want to just thank you all for your continued support for us year after year. You said a mouthful, but it means a lot. And without you all here, it'd be really difficult to meet the needs of our community. So we're going to challenge you again. We brought a box for you. We know that you guys are really good and have experience filling these for us. And I'd like to challenge anyone in this room who wants to do a diaper drive to reach out to us and get in touch with my manager of programs, Leslie Pike at the Diaper Bank. We'd love to have you join us in championing being better citizens for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. And as I always have to say when I see you, go Trojans. All right.
All right, thank you. Our next item, item 6, It's a presentation of a proclamation to Nancy Hand, President, League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson, proclaiming the day of Tuesday, September 20th, to be Voter Registration Day. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none. Motion carries. And Supervisor Grijalva, I think you're going to make the presentation.
Me? Okay. Okay. Whereas since 2012, National Voter Registration Day has been a national holiday observed on the fourth Tuesday of September to celebrate our democracy. Whereas National Voter I'm sorry, excuse me. Whereas National Voter Registration Day is a time of civic unity and an opportunity to set aside differences and honor the voting rights and privileges we have in the United States, and whereas the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson and other Pima County civic organizations support and informed an active engagement in democracy and voting represents, and whereas Pima County and civic organizations encourage everyone to register and vote to help family, friends, and neighbors register to vote, and whereas an objective of Pima County and civic organizations is to ensure that everyone is registered and gets involved in elections and becomes more civically engaged for the good of our shared democracy, and whereas Pima County and civic organizations encourage media and social media outlets to educate Pima County residents about the importance of registering and voting and to inform them about how and where to enjoy these democratic privileges. Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims Tuesday, September 20th to be Voter Registration Day, passed and adopted this 20th day of September 2022. Thank you so much for being here. Did you want to say a few words? Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Nancy Hand. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson. The League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson has been encouraging informed and active participation in government in Greater Tucson for 82 years. I would like to thank you, Supervisor Grijalva, and your staff for facilitating this proclamation. I would like to thank the board for joining with us in celebrating National Voter Registration Day. We celebrate National Voter Registration Day because registering to vote and voting is a cause for celebration. It's a cause for celebration for all of us, despite the differences of opinion we may have in policy, party, or priorities. We can all agree on certain fundamental truths that we hold to be self-evident, such as that all persons are created equal. And in our democratic republic, every person has the right to vote. Every person has the right to have their voice heard. So on this National Voter Registration Day, if you have moved, changed your name, or turned 18 since the last elections, please update your registration or register to vote. If you are a brand new voter who has not voted before, please register to vote. Because if our government is truly to be of the people, by the people, and for the people, we need every single person to vote. We need everyone's voice, regardless of age, starting at 18, race, religion, ability, gender identity, sexual orientation, income level, education level. We need all of you. We need every single person to vote. And just focusing a little bit on young people, I'm very happy to see many young people here today. 15 million people turned 18 since the last election and this election. If you are one of them or know one of them, please make sure they register and vote. If they will turn 18 on or before November 8th, they can register now. They don't have to wait. And I would issue a challenge to you young people. Blow us old people out of the water. Old people vote at much higher rates than young people. Young people turned out in record numbers in 2020. That's great news for our democratic republic. But we can do better. And I would challenge you to not let us old people have a greater voice, a stronger voice in the decisions that affect your lives your future. If you all vote, if every single one of you vote, you can change the face of government. You can make government reflect your needs, your priorities, and your future. That is the power of voting. So let's celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
For the record, Supervisor Hines is present. He joined at 9:21.
Thank you. We now move on to addendum item number 1, and it's a presentation of a proclamation to Chad Schupman, Director, University of Arizona Marching Band, proclaiming the day of Tuesday, September 20th, 2022, to be Bear Down Arizona Day. Chad Schupman will be accepting, and band members are going to provide us with an assembled rendition of Bear Down, Arizona. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Supervisor Grijalva.
One of your drum players, Theo.
Yes. He's in a pep band as well. Oh, yeah. He's great.
Okay. All right. Thank you for being here and for bringing a beautiful compliment of your band, the U of A band. Whereas the first public performance of the University of Arizona's fight song, Bear Down, Arizona, took place 70 years ago today on September 20th, 1952, at a downtown Tucson pep rally and has become one of the university's best known and best loved traditions. Whereas longtime university band director Jack K. Lee wrote the song after hearing the story of a student body president and quarterback John Button Salmon's deathbed message, tell them to bear down, which inspired the football team to victory in 1926 and became the battle cry for all of the Wildcat sports teams, the entire student body, and fans across southern Arizona. And whereas in the 70 years since its introduction, Bear Down, Arizona has become one of the great college fight songs, inspiring Wildcats worldwide to give their best effort, to show determination in the face of difficulty, and to always remember that they are a part of a wider and deeper tradition. Whereas the University of Arizona Marching Band, the pride of Arizona, has entertained, engaged, and elevated audience across southern Arizona for more than a century, performing at community events, celebrations, and commemorations, and building a reputation on the concept of pride, performance, respect, integrity, discipline, and excellence. And whereas the pride of Arizona has displayed these same characteristics when it has represented the university and the entire community statewide and on a national and international stages, delivering high-quality entertainment to audiences far and wide, including at the first Super Bowl and President Jimmy Carter's inaugural parade. And whereas the university and Pima County are longtime partners who have embraced the Bear Down spirit together to meet many diverse challenges, from COVID-19 pandemic and climate change to regional economic development and natural resource management, and those fortunes and futures that are inextricably linked. Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 to be Bear Down Arizona Day in this community, and encourages all residents to embrace the Bear Down spirit of resilience, tenacity, and courage in the face of opposition. Passed and adopted this 20th day of September 22.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Do you want to say a few words?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, esteemed members of the board, especially Supervisor Grijalva, for this really wonderful honor. Our students are amazing, and the thing that connects us over the generations is being able to play this song, sing this song, and say "Bear Down" and "Go Cats" to each other, and that legacy is something that's really an important part of the Tucson community and the university community, and it's absolutely my honor to be accepting this award on behalf of generations of Wildcats and members of the Pride of Arizona, the Go Go Trojans notwithstanding. What we'd like to do, and better than me. Well, okay, then, all right, that's okay, that's different. There you go. Well, no, then that's very good, actually. But yeah, I think better than me talking about it is hearing the song from the actual students. So thank you again very much.
Thank you so much.
This is the best part of the meeting, guys.
Thank you so much.
All right. We're going to move on to call to the public now. As a reminder, individuals wishing to participate telephonically should contact the clerk's office by the deadline date listed on the agenda. Each speaker will need to complete a speaker card and be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers must adhere to the rules of civility and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. When you are called upon to speak, step forward to the podium, state your name for the record, direct comments to the board. Speakers who do not abide by these guidelines will have their comments interrupted. And with that, we go to our first speaker, Stephanie Kirk.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Kirk. Matt Hines, you're late again. I'm going to start off by discussing the preparedness grant is a taxpayer money given to counties who push unconstitutional mandates onto the public through IGAs. These IGAs can be seen in the Board of Supervisors agenda, which model off the unconstitutional Model State Health Powers Act enacted after 9/11. You can see a soft copy of the CDC's you can see a soft copy on the CDC page under the title, The Shielding Plan. If the Board of Supervisors complies with the following governmental big pharma mandate request, money will be awarded to the county for its obedience in the exchange of the community's body sovereignty. For example, seen in item 24 of the IGA, it reads at 3.41, complies with existing and or future directives and guidance from the HHS CDC Secretary regarding control of the spread of COVID-19 grants will be rewarded. I just want to state that the CDC nor does the HHS make law. If you go back to a lot of the executive orders that were signed unconstitutionally by Doug Ducey. In fact, if you look at October 7th, 2021, in the whereas toward the bottom, it states that immunizations with a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine is a critical component of the whole government strategy to reduce COVID-19 related illnesses, hospitalizations, deaths, blah, blah, blah. We already know that the vaccine doesn't stop or prevent transmission, nor does it stop hospitalization or even death. Bribery is not only against the law, but it's continuously being played out by the Board of Supervisors as the board prepares to vote on giving 2 days of pay to those who can show that they are updated on their boosters. Not only should you be hiring people back, but you should be compensating. What can be offered to the families who lost their lives due to the forced mandates? With forced mandates to keep your job participate in society, many fell behind on rent, and as a result, the majority of the board voted to give large sums of tax money to pay rent to those who can't. I can't help but think what life would be like, and it would be better without the micromanaging and the mandates. In the meantime, many lives were affected, and a precious constable lost her life as she tirelessly delivered eviction notices after our government insisted we didn't need to pay rent. As a homeowner, you just needed to take one for the team. even though you relied upon this payment for income. Isn't it interesting to see all the security placed on the constable's rights to carry and protect, whereas the new 87,000 young IRS agents are more privileged than they get to carry? As injuries and deaths increase, the FDA tried to hide information while the Board of Supervisors continue to push drug to receive government grants. If the jab was so safe, why did the FDA ask for 55 years to complete a FOIA request on Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine? There is financial entanglement between the regulatory agencies.
We have Joanne DiFilippo joining us, Dr. Joanne DiFilippo joining us telephonically.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Sharon? Chair Bronson, can you hear me?
Yeah, your volume's a little low, but we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair Bronson and Supervisors. My name is Dr. Joanne DeFilippo, a Pima County taxpayer in District 3. Today, I would like to provide brief comments on several agenda items, but first I want to address Chair Bronson and offer my sympathies to you for the disrespectful behavior you and taxpayers were subject to at the last board meeting. For full details of my comments expressed herein, I refer you to my comment letter posted as an attachment to today's agenda item 11. It is time for every board member and elected official to recognize you are not above the law. There are statutory rules in place for behavior of elected officials sitting on the dais, as well as their use of county-provided resources. It is not okay to violate these rules, nor to subject either the chair, other supervisors, and or public to wanton disruptive behavior that violates rules of conduct, civil discourse, and including open meeting laws. I implore you to respect Supervisor Bronson's role as chair of the board and any directives forthcoming from her while she is trying to maintain order in the boardroom. This is your only notice. Hereafter, any violations will be reported directly to the Arizona Attorney General's office. I'd also like to address several other items on the agenda, namely Agenda Item 13, the Regional Prosperity Task Force, although I do know that it's now being removed from the agenda today. Nevertheless, please read my posted detailed comments that are attached to this agenda. I caution you in using rhetoric that can backfire in the community, subjecting the county to possible claims of discrimination, bias, and even including, but not limited to, disguised redlining methods. As for Agenda Item 15, COVID vaccination requirements, again, read my comment letter posted. As Joe Biden stated on Sunday's 60 Minutes show, the pandemic is over. There's no need for an additional 16 hours of paid leave. Better yet, instead of telling us how many additional sick and vacation days you want to award, why don't you start to tell us how many days and hours employees will work in a given year? Flip that model. I'm sure your constituents who are having a hard time paying their bills will be interested to know why they have to work 2, 3, and possibly 4 jobs to pay taxes that provide for these additional benefits. Also, please do not outsource our voter registration database management, and do not approve contract amendments awarding thousands, if not millions of dollars to subrecipients and contractors without first publicly reviewing their prior performance reports. I'm specifically referring to today's contract approvals for Visit Tucson and Rossi Associates, Inc. We deserve to first know what they did with the money they were already awarded before giving them additional funds. In conclusion, si alguien necesita que yo explico esto en español, por favor avísame y yo lo hago. Gracias. Thank you, Chair Bronson.
Thank you. Ryan Heath. Again, state your name for the record.
Hi there. My name is Ryan Heath. I'm the president and CEO of a nonprofit organization called the Gavel Project. I'm also an attorney licensed here in Arizona. I'm here because at the last meeting there was something that came out that was pretty shocking. I learned that the employee vaccination mandate for hiring, for promotion here in the county actually was never adopted as either an administrative policy or a board policy. That was actually stipulated per Mr. Christie here through the HR email. This is actually in writing and it's on the record. What that means is that for the last year, you have been illegally preventing individuals within this county, employees, from being promoted and from being hired. So here's the deal. You actually breached the contract of each individual employee that you already had on staff that was hired pre-COVID, because the Arizona Supreme Court, by requiring a vaccination mandate as a term of ongoing employment, explained in a case called ITTV DeMace, and in this case, they stated that employers actually, when they hire an employee in Arizona, agree to certain terms called implied in fact contract terms that arise from the surrounding circumstances of one's hiring. That means that if you had nothing in your employment contracts policy, there was nothing there as far as vaccination requirements for certain types of employees, you actually breached your contract with each of those employees. And I'm here to let y'all know that the Gavel Project, and you can go to thegavelproject.com to apply for representation, is taking cases to actually sue each of you personally. Not only for that breach of contract, but for violating the constitutional rights of the individuals that you were employing. Did you know that the Supreme Court in a case called West Virginia v. Barnett said that you cannot compel individuals to basically participate in a ceremony that has no efficacy or usefulness? We now know the vaccination is completely useless in preventing individuals from contracting COVID-19. It's completely useless in preventing hospitalizations and deaths. We now know that you, in effect, required individuals to participate in a ceremony in violation of their consciousness, which is protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And under Title 42, Section 1983 of the U.S. Code, I have the capacity as an attorney to sue each of you personally for violating the free speech rights of the individual employees that you terminated. And I intend to do so. Again, my name is Ryan Heath. I'm an attorney here in Arizona, and I look forward to seeing you more often. Thank you.
Carl Wagner.
Good morning, Chair Bronson and the board. My name is Carl Wagner. I am the Vice Chair of the Pima County Division of ASME Local 449. On behalf of our local, I would like to thank all of you for allowing me this time to speak, as well as taking the time to review and vote on this MOU before you today. I would also like to thank the Meet and Confer team from Pima County Administration. Our team appreciates their spirit of cooperation and compromise. We at AFSCME are encouraged by this renewed relationship that has been cultivated between our union and the county leadership. Implementation of this MOU will allow us to establish a voice for every employee at Pima County. It will provide a path to not only strengthen our union, but to help strengthen Pima County as an employer, and ultimately give us the opportunity to make positive changes within our community. We share the same goal of making Pima County a top employer within the state and believe that this is a great step towards attaining that goal. We are asking that you vote yes to approve this MOU. Thank you again so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Tim Law.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tim Locks. I was here last...
Oh, I'm sorry. I mispronounced again. My apologies.
That's okay. I forgive you. Please add another 5 seconds to my time.
Okay.
I have listened to the most recent EIC meeting. I read the original 10X proposal, and I read both the recorders and the election department after action reports, and quite frankly, I'm very disturbed. You guys were sold a bill of goods that there would be a centralized database, whereas when someone checked in, that database would be updated. That did not happen. It's what they call a distributed database. I'll get back to that. I worked at Vote Center 35 We were down for 2 hours because of technical issues that required a tech to come to our location. Voters were turned away and were sent to other voting locations. We have no knowledge whether or not they actually went to those locations. And so those voters may very well have been disenfranchised, and I know that 35 was not the only location where this problem happened. So from my point of view, we have a real problem. Okay, at the EIC meeting, the Director Hargrove talked about how transactions were performed. Delta files. And I don't have the time today to get into all of that. What I'm saying to you is it is very, very possible. In one instance, the same person checked into 2 different e-poll books. That is completely unacceptable and completely against what this whole system was about. Technically or theoretically, someone can go from one voting location to another before these Delta files go up to the cloud and back down again and vote a second time. All right, that's completely unacceptable. That's fraud right there, because someone would have to consciously do that. What do you think, Supervisor Hines, if a hospital system didn't get updated and someone received a double dose of morphine? Possibly they could die. This is the kind of thing that we're looking at. You guys are in a really bad place. Again, you were sold a bill of goods. And I state right now, the 2022 Pima County primary election may very well have been fraudulent, and I think you are wide open at this very moment for a lawsuit. And we will end up, if this continues, we will end up like Maricopa County, because I'm pretty sure I can say something will happen. You want another Maricopa County? Bring it on. That's all I can say to you. So, I am respectfully asking this board to have Director Hargrove produce the Delta file transfer logs. I want to see what actually happened on that day. I also want to know what the frequency is where these Delta files were transferred up and down. You had 129 locations. That you times that by 2. That's how many poll books had to be updated throughout the day. Not just a one-time thing, but throughout the day. That is a mess. Absolute mess. Now, so you have a choice. The one is, I'm glad I'm not in your shoes right now. But you have a couple of choices here. The first one is to continue with this technology and move forward with the general election, in which case you're going to have a whole lot of problems. Whatever happened in the primary is going to be magnified in the general election by virtue of the fact that you have more people out voting. Secondly, you can become national heroes and stop this mess and go back to some modified way of the way we used to vote, a modified level. And I think that that's very possible. We are a
And I've given you 30 extra
Thank you.
seconds,
Thank
so thank you for that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
Peter Norquist.
All right. Good morning, members of the board and Administrator Lesher. I'm also here to discuss the administrative requirement for the documentation of COVID-19 vaccination status for employment that was recommended with Pima County, as well as the health insurance surcharge for unvaccinated employees to become effective on September 24th. This is in response to House Bill 2498, signed by Governor Ducey on April 25th, 2022, which precludes any local government from requiring a COVID-19 vaccination as a condition of employment. So continuing this requirement would actually be illegal. However, instead of stopping the COVID-19 vaccine mandates altogether, Ms. Lesher is now requesting that vaccinated employees who provide yearly documentation of COVID-19 booster vaccination status receive an additional 16 hours of paid leave to continue to incentivize a highly vaccinated workforce and continue to segregate unvaccinated employees. This is presumably predicated in part upon the assumption that unvaccinated employees contribute to a greater medical cost burden than vaccinated employees. However, given the fact that the CDC considers a person unvaccinated for the first 2 weeks after receiving their most recent recommended shot, the window of time when adverse reactions are most likely to occur, it would be good to see specific data upon which this is based, since I assume that you are adhering to this guideline. If employees who seek medical treatment in the 2-week window after receiving a shot are being counted in the unvaccinated group, I'm sure that the problem is clear in regard to policy. Also, for your consideration, I recently became aware of a businessman in France who died after getting the COVID shot, and he had a life insurance policy worth millions of dollars. The life insurance company decided not to pay out because the COVID vaccine is a medical experiment, and death from a medical experiment is not a covered entity. Furthermore, even the judge says the side effects of the shot are well known. They've been made public. There's absolutely no way this gentleman could not have known the side effects. He willingly chose to get the shot, and he died as a result. And because it was a choice, they're calling it a suicide. And suicides, along with experimental drugs, are not covered by life insurance. Could this happen in the U.S.? The American Life Insurance Council has also said that life insurance policies may deny payment if you die from the COVID-19 shots because they are experimental drugs. We all might want to check our policies. Finally, on another note, since you and the City of Tucson seem to kind of be frenemies, I would be curious to know why the Marin City Council, or the City of Tucson Council, voted unanimously last Tuesday to declare a state of emergency in their meeting with no justification and no end date given. There might be a simple answer, but it was very ambiguous. May I quote the text? It's one sentence.
I'm sorry?
May I quote the text? It's one sentence. Whereas it is necessary for the preservation of the peace, health, and safety of the City of Tucson that this ordinance 11957 become immediately effective, an emergency is hereby declared to exist, and this ordinance shall be effective immediately upon its passage and adoption. I'm just curious.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Anna Bedoya. Anna? Oh, there you are. I knew I saw you somewhere in the room.
Madam Chair, Board of Supervisors, thank you so much. My name is Montserrat Caballero, and I work at Pima College, Adult Basic Education for College and Career. And this week is National Family Literacy and Adult Education Week. And we have two very special guests who would like to to address the board.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Athena Martinez. I am 32 years old and a mother of 6. I am also a first-generation college student. As a young child, I faced homelessness, living on the streets with my mother on and off until I was placed into DCS custody at the age of 12. I went to many group homes and some foster homes up until when I aged out. At 18, I ended up getting pregnant and I had to drop out of school because I had no support or resources to continue. I faced homelessness for a long period of time. I returned to school once before when I was 24, but with little to no success, I had no desire or drive to complete it. I returned to school last year in February of 2021 at the age of 30 with Pima's adult education program, determined to change my life and my children's outlook on their futures. As of August 9th, 2021, I discovered Building and Construction Technology's IBEST program and began the mountain climb to my success. Through BCT IBEST, I've become more confident in myself as a learner, and I've gained more knowledge and better communication skills. I've built many friendships. I have completed 22 credits, and this past April, I was inducted into the National Adult Education Honor Society. I was nominated by my instructors. Not only has IBEST changed my outlook on school, but through the program, with the support and encouragement from others, I earned my high school equivalency diploma within just a month and a half. I graduate this Friday. I've gained a support system and a core. Thank you. I gained a support system and a cohort that believes in each other. I have a cheer squad and 2 advisors who keep me organized and on task. I honestly don't think I would have made it this far without the additional instructional time. The extra time gave me the chance to get ahead and relearn skills that I lost over time. As of right now, I'm working as a student aide at Downtown Campus Learning Center, and I have become more driven to keep going beyond the certificate. I have found that my children, my husband, my family, and my cohort have become my drive and my motivation to continue my education. I want them to see me succeed so that they continue to succeed as well. I am wiser, smarter, and more ambitious, and I hope to continue down the path I am traveling. I have a brighter, more successful future. Thank you for your continued support.
Congratulations.
My name is Ana Bedoya, and I came here to the United States in 2014, and English was a huge barrier for me. Thanks to adult education, I improved my English. I'm now here speaking to you. I was able to enroll in coding classes, citizenship classes, and entrepreneurship. I became a USA citizen in 2020, And these days, I get hired as a media designer in Pima Community College, thanks to adult education. And I want to thank you all for your support to the program.
Thank you. Robert Royce.
I'm Robert Royce. I've been doing readings from Mr. Jefferson's first inaugural address all summer. And I'm going to finish his fourth paragraph today. I'm actually going to do some reading because I don't want to miss anything. Absolute acquiescence in the decisions of the majority, the vital principle of republics from which there is no recourse but to force. The vital principle and the vital principle and the vital principle and let's see, where are we going? Well, I got it right here. No appeal but to force, the vital principle and immediate parent of despotism, a well-disciplined militia, our best reliance for peace and the first moments of war till regulars may relieve them. The supremacy of the civil over the military authority. Economy in the public expense, that labor may be lightly burdened. Honest payment of our debts and sacred preservation of the public faith, encouragement of agriculture and commerce as its handmaiden, the diffusion of information and arraignment of all abuses at the bar of the public reason, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of person under the habeas corpus, and trial by jury, impartially selected. These principles form the bright constellation that has come before us and guided our steps through an age of revolution and reformation. The wisdom of our sages and the blood of our heroes have been devoted to their attainment. They should be the creed of our political faith, the text of civil instruction, the touchstone by which we try the services of those we trust, and if we should wander from them in moments of error or alarm, let us hasten to retrace our steps and regain the road which alone leads to peace, liberty, and safety. So what have I been getting at all this summer? Peace, liberty, safety, prosperity, and a pathway to happiness are all at our fingertips. They were promised to us on March 4th of 1801, and all Mr. Jefferson asked is that we be true to the principles that he laid out, which we have never done.
Thank you. Christine Bausman.
Hello, it's Bowserman, and that's okay.
Bowserman?
Bowserman.
Okay.
My name is Christine Bowserman, and I would like to discuss first the DBA hire. And to give you a little bit of my background, I went to the U of A for systems engineering, the first class they ever had. We had a great instructor who told us the number one rule of a system is you don't need a system. People were installing these massive computer systems that did way beyond what they need, and the maintenance of them was more. I didn't graduate. I was in that group that got hired out to be be a computer programmer. But I do have a background in that, including I was an environmental computer programmer, and we did installations in Lockheed, Marietta, VA, nationwide, high level with a Wang 2 enterprise level system. We converted from that to Unix for mainframes. I also went to Oracle SQL 1.0, SQL class 1.0 for programming 1.0 forms up in California when it was new. This is not new technology. It's been around from the 80s. We do not need an enterprise level system of this complexity to maintain our voter database or count our votes. Very few people have the skill set to understand these systems, to maintain these systems, to fix these systems. It really is a high-level skill set. I didn't have it. I was a programmer. I was a part of maintaining the program and on that. So, but I will say one thing. All of our installations worked correctly. Mostly correct is just unacceptable when it comes to voting for people. Mostly correct is unacceptable. Our recorder's office has one job: we maintain our voter files and voter base. Our elections office has one job: count our votes. Why do we have unelected vendors now running our elections? And that's what you're doing. You're passing the buck to an unelected person. My other thing is, as an elected PC, there is a law, and I'm kind of wondering after some of these other comments, like whoever reads the law, you cannot pass voter file data through like an email. We have to go down with a USB drive and give it to the party, and they have to put it in and download the voter database onto it. So why are you talking about putting this in the cloud and letting some unelected vendor have access to it all? Now, moving on to the recorder's office, I was the regional director for Jim Lehman. I set up the greeters outside the 75-foot lines. State law requires we have an inspector, a marshal, and a judge. You had, at the 3 voting locations open for 14 days, no inspector, marshal, judge, no observers. The one open for 12 days, none, no 4. I don't get why the recorder's office, and this is what I've been told, well, it's the recorder's office, not the elections office. Well, we have laws that we have to follow while we're voting. Why doesn't the recorder's office have to follow them? Is kind of my question with that. And so, yeah, that was the thing. We had no observers in any of these locations, and they weren't identified even on Election Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carolyn Cowan. Carolyn?
Good morning. My name's Caroline Cowan, and I was here last week.
And I apologize. We haven't started your time yet. I apologize. I gave you incorrect information.
Okay. Do I start all over?
Yep. Start all over.
I'm Caroline Cowan. I was here on the September 6th meeting along with 5 other people. It was a small group, but 4 of the 6 was representing the community that lives inside the 300-foot notification area of the zoning that was on the agenda for last week, or last meeting, number 36. It was the Irving, Valencia, and Bilby zoning request for changing. And we understood that it had been postponed to the 20th, which is today. And so, and at the meeting on the 6th, Sharon Bronson came to us at the break at about 10:30, saying that we should all go home because we weren't going to be seeing, they weren't going to be calling that on the agenda for that day. It had been postponed. So everybody left. I spoke with Supervisor Grijalva on my way out, reiterating the problems of the surface streets that is going to be impacted by this. And so yesterday, I was informed that, no, indeed, it had been called, and it had been voted on, and Hines refused it. Thank you very much, Dr. Hines. Everybody else passed it. But watching the video, it looked like it was asking for a traffic impact study, and I'm not even sure whether you guys approved the traffic impact study or if you approved the rezoning. So that's odd. And so I feel I was misled at the last meeting, and all of the people that was with me feel they were misled. The members in the community that adjacent to that, they were all called to speak, and those were the very people that Ms. Bronson, Supervisor Bronson had told to go home. So I don't think that's correct. And my biggest concern isn't the impact on the traffic on Valencia. It's the impact on the neighborhood little feeder roads that are going to get people north to Irvington and north to Ajo. Those roads are not set up for growth. They're not. And this is a rural horse area. It's a horse community out there. This is overbuilding. The people who bought the property knew the zoning when they bought it. Let them stick to a greatly reduced zoning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, Ann Rose. Oh,
Buenos dias. I don't include my last name because I know it will be butchered.
okay. What?
Dichov, D-I-C-H-O-V.
Okay,
V as in Victor.
okay.
I tip my nursing cap to the nursing students present today, to their instructor for bringing them here, and to the university musicians. The energy was great. I'd like to talk today about totalitarianism. Mass formation psychosis is a form of mass hypnosis that emerges when specific conditions are met and almost always precede the rise of totalitarian systems. Think Stalinist Russia, where my father was born in St. Petersburg in 1907, had to flee. My grandfather was killed by the Bolsheviks. Also think Nazi Germany. 4 central conditions need to exist in order for mass formation psychosis to arise: widespread loneliness and lack of social bonding, which lead to experiencing life as meaningless, which leads to widespread free-floating anxiety and discontent, which leads to widespread free-floating frustration and aggression, which results in feeling out of control. Under mass formation, a population enters a hypnotic-type trance that makes them willing to sacrifice anything, including their lives and their freedom. Dr. Matthias Desmet, a Belgian psychologist and statistician, presented the concept of mass formation as an explanation for the behavior seen with regard to the COVID pandemic and its countermeasures. He focused on the psychological mechanisms seen in society and became convinced that mass formation was occurring on a large scale. A key characteristic of this psychological trend is that it makes people radically blind to everything that goes against the narrative they believe in. Another specific characteristic is that people are willing to sacrifice everything that is important to them, including their health, their wealth, the health of their children, the future of their children. A third characteristic, once people are in the grip of this psychosis, they typically show a tendency of cruelty toward people who do not go along with the narrative. They typically do so as if it is an ethical duty. In the end, they are typically inclined first to stigmatize and then to eliminate and destroy the people who do not go along with the masses. A key challenge on all of our individual levels will be to maintain basic principles of humanity. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote in the Gulag Archipelago, highlights the importance of holding on to your humanity in the midst of an inhumane situation. Quote, "That may be is the one and only thing that can guarantee us a good outcome of the entire process, which is a necessary process, he thinks. This crisis is not meaningless. It is not meaningless. It's a process in which society can give birth to something new, something much better than exists up until now, he wrote. Thank you.
Thank you. Drew Heaton.
Need these. Madam Chair, Supervisors, and Administrator Lesher, aloha kako. As you know, my name is Drew Heaton, and I've come before you many times, and now for many years. I express my gratitude to those of you who attended the recent community meeting. You heard me say some harsh words that you are participating in a government cartel, but I don't say that with any animosity. For all I know, you participate unknowingly with the best of intentions. I'm giving you the opportunity to reconsider your actions. The last time I stood here, I departed from my usual line of comments to offer a history lesson about the once sovereign Hawaiian kingdom, to illustrate what I have discovered standing before you so many times. Presidential apologies are exchanged for facts. I understand the sentiment, the desire to move on, but at what consequence? To this day, the U.S. illegally occupies the nation of Hawaii. But that's okay, just move on. We brought them civilization, right? The fact is that at that time, they were one of the most literate nations in the world, and today, they are the least literate state. Progress has made an elite faction wealthy and the majority of indigenous population homeless. Like the O'odham and the Yaqui, they could self-sustain their population with food and water. Now, with their dependence on progressive government, they'd be without food and water in 6 days. I understand the frustration of my fellow Americans who seem surprised that national, state, and local officials disregard the Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Arizona that you, I, and members of law enforcement all swore an oath to protect against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But Hawaiians and American Indians warned them. Injustice breeds more injustice. The U.S. took their land, their property, their ability to live and feed their children. Now they are doing the same to their own people. Americans, we have kept the reservations out of sight and out of mind, and now the government has brought the reservation to us. Queen Liliuokalani warned Americans what happens when a blind eye is turned to injustice. She said, "Where would men already proved capable of outwitting the conservatism of the United States and defending its strongest traditions, individual rights and national sovereignty, capable of changing its policy in a single coup, stop in their schemes?" It is for the American people and their representatives to answer these questions as they deal with me and my people kindly, generously, and justly. So may the great ruler of all nations deal with the grand and glorious nation of the United States of America. Again, Queen Liliuokalani said this in 1900s. If your hearts cherish justice, live aloha. And my apologies for having to leave early.
Thank you. Well, that concludes call to the public. I'm going to move on quickly to the addendum agenda and item 3, which is a meet and confer memorandum of understanding. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections, hearing none, motion carries. We now have an executive session. Okay, we very rarely get clapped. All right, we have one executive session item. I'd entertain a motion to move into exec.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. If there are no objections, we'll convene in exec and reconvene in regular at the sound of the gavel. in this area. So. We are reconvened in regular session. We had one executive session item. Ms. Lesher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation is to accept the negotiated settlement as discussed in executive session.
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to accept. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to the Board of Supervisors, sitting as other boards. We're now sitting as the Flood Control District Board. Item 9, Santa Cruz River Management Plan and Resolution Number 2022-FC3. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We move on to the consent calendar. Does anybody, do any board members wish to vote on an item on the consent separately?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
I'd like to deal separately and pull consent items number 2, 3, 4, 5, 21, and 24.
2, 3, 4, 5, 21, and 24.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
And Chair Bronson.
Wait, well, okay, let me make sure with the clerk. Okay, Supervisor Grijalva.
10 and 11.
10 and 11, okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
19.
19. Okay, so we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 21, 24, well, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 19, 21, and 24. All right, I'll move the remainder of the consent in its entirety.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item number 2. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
for the sake of time, if with your permission, I would be willing to combine item 2, 3, and 21 together for discussion and movement because they all basically deal with the same issue that I'm asking that they be pulled for.
Okay, 2, 3, and 21. I'll
Yes,
move
ma'am.
those items.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, we are again authorizing emergency rental assistance through various programs, Sunnyside Unified School District, Family Housing Resources, and U.S. Department of Treasury, and we have been approving a great deal of money over the last few months on rental assistance, and I don't feel comfortable voting on these in this manner anymore because we have no accountability. We don't know really where it's being derived from and where it's going to. And I think even though it is federal money, it's still taxpayer money, that I am requesting that staff provide a flow chart that illustrates the direction of historical and current funding from the Emergency Rental Assistance Program through Pima County to outside agencies. If we could get a flow chart of a historical background of when this program began, what outside agencies are receiving them, how much has been diverted to these outside agencies, and what has passed through Pima County to these outside agencies, I would appreciate that. And Madam Chair, other than that, that was the only reason I pulled these, and I'd be prepared to move them.
Okay, I think there was a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Are there any objections? No objections, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to 4 and 5, I assume you want to combine those?
Yes, please, Madam Chair.
I'll move those. I'll move items 4 and 5.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Madam Chair, we have had the Rossi and Associates for a number of years as our legislative liaison and representative with the legislature. We have approved his contract amounts on numerous years. I'm requesting that the county administrator to direct Rossi and Associates to provide the Board of Supervisors with a presentation of accomplishments obtained by Rossi and Associates on behalf of Pima County over the past 2 years. And I'm further requesting that the county administrator provide the Board of Supervisors with periodic and regular updates of Rossi and Associates activities on behalf of Pima County. The presentation of accomplishments obtained over the last 2 years. In addition to that, a formulation of a game plan as to how Rossi and Associates wishes to pursue future legislative agenda items on behalf of Pima County as well. So I guess a state of the legislature lobbying by Rossi and Associates is what I'm looking for. And today is September 20th. I would imagine perhaps the second meeting in October.
October 18th, thank you, sir.
And then, Madam Chair, Ms. Lesher, if you could provide in your county administrator update from time to time, periodic but regular updates on what is transpiring through Rossi and Associates at the state legislature, so we can at least be kept abreast of what's going on with that. And other than those two asks for directions, I'm prepared to move these items.
I think they were moved, but if there's no further discussion, if there are no objections, motion carries unanimously. Brings us to item 10. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva, I think you told us.
Thank you. This is a master agreement for one-year renewable options to clean the shelters at the animal care centers, and I'm just wondering if we can get some information about why this isn't being done in-house as opposed to an outside company.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Grijalva, historically the facility cleaning at the at the new PAC shelter has been done by an outside vendor, and the reason for that has been multifold. Number one, the flexibility to staff up and staff down that we don't necessarily have when we have a fixed number of employees, and that has allowed us to achieve a certain degree of savings in terms of the costs of that operation. The second reason why it has made sense for us to partner with Central Pets is because they have been a reliable and excellent partner in terms of our disease control mitigation. One of the things that I think that you will remember before we were in our new facility is that multiple times we had to shut down because of disease control issues. Many of those issues were mitigated with the new physical plant, but many of those issues were also mitigated by the introduction of this particular vendor into our system. So they have performed well on our behalf and are doing a good service.
So when you say that they can staff up and down, is this award amount fixed, or is that just depending on demand?
The award amount itself is fixed. They staff up in terms of hours and intensity, so that the cleaning services are more intense during the periods of the year when we have more intense utilization of the facility.
Like now.
Exactly, exactly. And we're able to, and they are able to scale it down. There are periods of time, there are weeks and months where our shelter census is relatively good. They're able to scale down, and they're able to do so within their staffing structure. Please note that these contracts abide by the livable wage prescriptions of the Board of Supervisors, and sometimes we end up sort of hiring some of their folks on to do other animal-related tasks.
Okay, thank you for including that, because that was going to be my next question. All right, thank you.
There's no further discussion. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 11, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva.
For this specific item, is there a reason why we're not working with the city to provide the water at this location?
So, Madam Chair, Supervisor Grijalva, that's a great question. So we have the fairgrounds proper out there, and then we have land around that that's been designated as the Southeast Employment and Logistics Center. In 2020, the Board of Supervisors approved formation of a domestic water improvement district, and we used Westland Resources to assist us with doing that. That district has not been fully activated. It's but one option that we might utilize in the future for water service. Connecting to City of Tucson water is another option that certainly we are discussing with the city and exploring. This particular amendment to the Westland contract is for an existing groundwater well that serves the motorsports complex and the shooting sports complex out at the fairgrounds area. So that well is failing. That well was part of the infrastructure that would be used for the domestic water improvement district, but separate from that particular approach, the well is needed to be replaced for the existing uses out there. So we're adding to this contract to go ahead and have them do the 100% design for that well replacement, and that will serve those facilities up until a point where we decide what the long-term water solution is out
So
there.
you are talking to the City of Tucson potentially for the long-term solutions?
Chair, Supervisor Grijalva, yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
There's no further discussion. Is there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. So item 19, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva.
Now, this was me, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Supervisor Scott.
That's okay. I just wanted to pose a couple of questions to either Ms. Lesher or anybody she would designate to answer them. The purpose of this item is to pay for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to conduct an expedited review and provide a 408 permit. If the review isn't expedited, the bids and work costs could potentially increase. If you scroll down to the amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the state and Pima County, the project location is Santa Cruz River/River Road. I wanted to know the reason, the need for the expedited review, what's a 408 permit, and I'm assuming this is related to the Sunset Road project and the extension of Sunset Road to River Road, or is it a different one?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, to start with the last question, yes, it's all related. So the labeling of this item, the county had a project that was from the frontage road, essentially the east frontage road over to River Road, and that project's been combined with the Arizona Department of Transportation project for the Sunset Traffic Interchange and the mainline widening project. So it is all part and parcel. We've bundled that with the state. They are out currently under bid for the entire project, so this would be constructed as a single project by the Arizona Department of Transportation. The amendment here is for, as you've indicated, the expediting of the 408 permit, because we are crossing the Rito River with a bridge, and there are existing bank protection improvements there. We need U.S. Army Corps of Engineer approval to go ahead
And I don't think he knows what a 408 is. Can you explain it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's basically, Madam Chair and Supervisor Scott, basically ensuring that there are no negative impacts to waters of the U.S.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If there are no further discussion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 24, acceptance health. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Madam Chair, thank you. This item is an acceptance of a Arizona Department of Health Services amendment to provide for the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Program and amend the scope of the work, plus the amounts of contributions. First of all, my first question is, as it says in the agenda item, that this money is being commingled from the Health Special Revenue Fund. What is the Health Special Revenue Fund?
The Health Special Revenue Fund is one of your many special revenue funds, Supervisor Christie, that exists within the budget. This one specifically is set aside for what we have to deal with in terms of the public health response.
Approximately how many health special revenue funds exist?
There's a single special revenue fund in health.
There's just one?
Yes.
And monies from that fund, and what is the balance of the fund? Do you know offhand?
It is memorialized in your budget that was approved, and I do not have that at the top of my head.
So that's coming from a line item budget out of the health department for special revenue, and in this case, to accept this grant.
Yes, it is a separate fund that is set up within your budget that supports most of the activities of the health department. There are other funds that support the activity of the health department, including grants, etc. So this is a contract with an intergovernmental agreement with the Arizona Department of Health Services. Those funds flow into the grant fund of the health department. There is some cost-sharing matching requirement that is done on the special revenue fund side.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I have issues with this particular agreement. In the background, I'll illustrate that it says under 3.4, the contractor, and the contractor is Pima County, the contractor shall comply with existing and/or future directives and guidance from the Health and Human Services Department and from the CDC Secretary regarding control of the spread of COVID. And it goes on further to describe and mandate in the background that the contractor, Pima County, is to assist the United States government in the implementation and enforcement of federal orders related to quarantine and isolation. This is very troubling. This shows that the directives are coming out of Washington and not on a local level. And my feeling is that any health emergency plan should originate at the local level, the county level, or even the state level, but not the federal level, and that the Pima County Board of Supervisors must approve any and all final health emergency plans, and they not be mandated by the federal government. So, Madam Chair, I will be voting against this item.
All right, is there any further discussion? I'll call the question. Any opposition?
I object.
One objection. If there are no further objections, motion carries 4-1.
Public comment on this issue?
No. All right, moving back to the regular agenda, we're on item 11, amended Board of Supervisors meeting schedule. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move the item.
Second. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 13 was continued till November, item 12, I'm sorry.
Chair Bronson, I have no update today, thank you.
I'm sorry, I apologize to you, but you said you don't have any?
Do not, thank you.
Okay, got it. My apologies, Ms. Lesher. Item 13, as I said, has been continued. Now we have item 14, fiscal year 2023-24 budget process. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
Under the, in the document that's attached to this item, under background, the third bullet says topics will include but not be limited to the following, and then there are 10 items listed. I just wanted to reiterate for Ms. Lesher and her team that I'm also expecting that we'll be talking about the long-term plan for vacancy savings. When we have these discussions, there were a lot of concerns, issues that came up during the budget hearings going into this fiscal year about how vacancies and whether or not they're indeed being advertised or handled by different departments. There was an indication that there's a long-term plan for making use of vacancy savings, but I think that also has to there also has to be some consistency in terms of how vacancies and advertising of those vacancies are handled between departments.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor Grijalva.
I would just like to commend the county and administration on entering into this budget process this early. My understanding is we haven't done that, at least publicly, and that having this conversation really leads into working together to create a strategic plan for the entire county. And so this will be like that sort of the blueprint to be able to move forward in that direction. So I'm glad to support it.
Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We'll move on to item 15, COVID-19 vaccination requirements for Pima County employees. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
With your permission, there are 3 distinct issues involved in this particular item.
Before we have discussion, we need to have a motion.
I move.
Okay.
Move the item.
Okay, there's a motion. I'll second it. Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 3 distinct items and issues within this particular agenda item. The first one is the recommendation of ending the administrative requirement for the documentation of COVID-19 vaccination status for employment with Pima County effective September 24th, 2022. That's one. The second item is the health insurance surcharge will also be eliminated at that same time. And then the third item is the receiving of an additional 16 hours of paid leave to continue to incentivize a highly vaccinated workforce on behalf of employees. I would respectfully request that we deal with each of those items individually.
All right, there's a motion and a second. When you say deal with them individually, could you clarify?
Could I what?
Clarify what you mean by dealing.
Sure. I'll point them out again.
No, but what do you mean by dealing with them?
Vote on each one.
Well, the motion is for the entire packet.
And I'm asking that they be
Then you have to make a substitute motion.
Okay. May I do so?
I'll withdraw my second, certainly.
Okay. As stated, I'd like to make a substitute motion that the 3 distinct items in that agenda item be separated and voted on individually.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Does Supervisor Christie need to withdraw his original motion?
He does.
I do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
I will move that the board adopt the recommendation of staff to end the administrative requirement for the documentation of COVID-19 vaccination status for employment with Pima County effective September 24th, 2022.
I'll second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
I think it's important for public information to note the significance of that date because the legislature did not attach an emergency clause to House Bill 2498. It does not become effective until September 24th.
Correct. If there is no further discussion.
Chair Bronson, I'll just make a comment about this entire item. You know, I really feel like this is one of those overreaches of our state in where they don't allow the local Pima County Health Department to make the decisions that are in the best interest of that community. And so I am reluctantly going to vote for it because it is state law and we have to sort of show that I guess, go ahead and follow the law in this situation. But I do want to make note that the Pima County Health Department and this county did a really good job of keeping our community safe and encouraging vaccines and doing what we needed to do in order to make the decisions that were in the best interest of our county. Those vaccination requirements and masking is something that kept our workforce safer, and we had more people vaccinated as a result of those incentives. And so I'm very proud to have been able to support those initiatives. In my other board, we had to vote and to abide by state law, and it is incredibly frustrating for us as a governing body not to be able to have local control over the issues that affect our community.
Thank you, Supervisor Grijalva. Is there any further discussion?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
Just to follow up on Supervisor Grijalva's comments, I believe that the substance of her comments are one reason why Pima County has put in front of the County Supervisors Association Legislative Policy Summit the need for counties to assert their rights under Arizona state law as being the regional public health authorities for their areas, and I expect that we will have a healthy and robust discussion about that at the County Supervisors Association Legislative Policy Summit, because it is not just Pima County that has concerns about moves that were made by the legislature and the governor to restrict our statutory authority as the public health authority.
Well, from the time I've served with CSA, it's always been about local control. And two big items, local control and stop passing the buck to us in terms of writing checks. All right, well, I think we've exhausted this drama. I'll call the question. Anybody opposed?
I object.
Supervisor?
I object.
And we should sue them.
Oh, good way to spend taxpayer dollars. All right, there are two objections. Any further objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Now, Supervisor Christie, what's...
The next item, Madam Chair, is, if we recall, at the last board meeting, I requested that not only the health insurance surcharge be eliminated at that time, but those who had incurred the surcharge be reimbursed. And I coupled that with offering to hire back and pay with back pay those who lost their jobs as a result of not wanting to take the COVID shot. So at this particular time, we can only deal with one of those items, and we've got before us that I move that the health insurance surcharge be eliminated as effective September 24th, 2022.
I'll second.
Chair Bronson,
Supervisor Grijalva.
Just to confirm that the House bill that will go into effect on September 24th, the law precludes any local government from requiring COVID-19 vaccination as a condition of employment. So we can't then charge the surcharge.
We can do what? I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
She just confirmed that we don't have the statutory authority to require the surcharge.
Very good.
Is there any further discussion? I'll call the question. Any opposition? No opposition, so motion carries unanimously. Supervisor Christie.
Madam Chair, this is the third item separated, and it is the recommendation by staff that vaccinated employees who provide yearly documentation of COVID-19 booster vaccination status to Human Resources receive an additional 16 hours of paid leave to continue to incentivize a highly vaccinated workforce. This particular item I'm against because it's basically paying people not to work, and this is an individual choice to take the vaccine or not, and it should not be a taxpayer expense to incentivize such an activity of vaccination. We don't even know how much this is going to cost. There's been no analysis of the time involved that people will be paid not to work. So I would move, well, this is already moved, so.
No, it hasn't.
It has been. I would move that we vote down and do not allow employees to receive an additional 16 hours of paid leave to continue if they are vaccinated with the booster.
Is there a second to that motion? Motion dies for lack of a second. Is there Supervisor Grijalva?
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and move the recommendation of staff and to allow for an additional 16 hours of vacation, PTO, for those employees who remain fully vaccinated, and share that information with Pima County HR.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. I actually share some of Supervisor Christie's concerns. I need to see a fiscal note on this. And then I have one other question for Dr. Garcia. You said it's stated as yearly boosters. How accurate is that, and how did that language evolve?
Chair Bronson, at this point, the anticipation is that COVID vaccination on a go-forward basis will require ongoing yearly boosters, much in the same way that we
do the flu.
And so that the language is meant to memorialize the fact that there is benefit that is accrued to the county, financial benefit in terms of our health plan expenditures associated with folks who are vaccinated, and therefore that 16 hours of paid leave recognizes that.
I appreciate that, but I think there's a cognitive disconnect. We don't require people to get flu shots, and we don't reward them for getting flu shots.
Chair Bronson, we actually do have incentives that we provide for employees who are vaccinated against the flu, and those are.
It's part of the 100 points.
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
I'm concerned also about HIPAA. We will be asking employees to reveal themselves publicly to HR in order to receive this benefit. Again, Dr. Garcia has referenced the cost savings to the health insurance plan. I've seen no such study or no such analysis. And in this particular case, I would agree with our chair that there are no requirements for other vaccinations, and there are no rewards for receiving other vaccinations, and this one should not be put into that mix.
Is there any further discussion? Let me call the question then.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
Dr. Garcia sent us a fairly lengthy memo documenting the savings to Pima County. And so we may want to resend that out to Supervisor Christie if he missed it.
All right, is there any further discussion? I'll call the question. Let's do roll call.
Okay. This is for approval of staff's recommendation for the additional 16 hours of paid leave.
Correct.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Reluctantly, yes. Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 16, contract with Our Family Services. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item, excuse me, allergies. Moving on to item 17, it's a contract with Bosse Rollman. There's a correction to the funding source. It should read contingency fund. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections?
Madam Chair?
Supervisor.
There are two entities involved in this particular item. There's the Pima County Attorney's Office and the Pima County Sheriff's Department. And my question is, why is this expenditure coming out of the county's general fund and not the Sheriff's Department budget?
Ms. Lesher?
Chair Bronson, again, this is the sixth amendment to this contract. This began several years ago, and it was determined at that time that in order to defend this litigation, it would come out of contingency fund. I'm happy to go back and look at what the initial conversation was several years ago, but it was whether or not we simply move contingency fund to pay for it in this way or contingency fund to the Sheriff's Department to pay for litigation. But I can research when it started several years ago.
Okay, Madam Chair, so Ms. Lesher, you don't recall what the rationale for the county paying for it for this particular item?
As opposed for coming out of the individual budgets?
Could I request that information, but we can go ahead and vote on the item?
Happy to provide that to you, Supervisor Christie. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 18, Development Services, final plat. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 19 is elections, vote centers. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
Move that we approve the list of designated vote centers submitted by the Elections Division.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We're moving on to Human Resources, items 20 and 21. Does anybody wish to divide the question? If not, I'll move items 20 and 21.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
I looked at the background on this particular item, and if you'll...
Which item?
Both items, basically.
Okay.
They kind of... And the discussion on the background says, the proposed language will ensure that holiday benefit is available only to an employee who is either actively working or otherwise on an approved leave utilizing their own accruals. I'm not clear on what this policy revision is resolving and what problems are in existent or exist that need solving through this motion. What are we trying to accomplish here?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it is to to close some loopholes, if you will. In effect, we have had situations in which an employee was able to start employment with the county and do so on the beginning of a pay period, which might be a Sunday, a Monday holiday, make a decision not to remain with the county or to move on in a different direction with the county, and then be allowed to be paid for a holiday benefit. In looking through these loopholes, this is just, both of these are almost Scribner's errors to clarify that kind of loophole, so that we're not paying people for a vacation day and not have them working for Pima County.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lesher.
Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 22. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
we discussed this at the last meeting, that we are being asked by the Recorder's Office to provide a database management by an outside consultant who has no other customers, as far as we know, who will be working at home and who will be in charge of our voter database to the tune of $90,000. This is going to lead, and does lead, to a great deal of concern about the sanctity and the security of our voter database. It's going to be managed on the cloud, on a cloud. All of those items in particular truly lead to a lot of skepticism, and I'm wondering, has the Recorder already contracted with this company?
Ms. Lesher?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, in my conversations with the Recorder, it is my understanding that no, we have not yet contracted with the individual, or she has not.
Well, the database should be under the lock and key and the security of the Recorder's Office, period. It should not be farmed out to a consulting firm in the privacy of his home, and the cloud is just somebody else's computer. This does not lead to any secure ideal of our voter database, and I think it needs to be sent back to the Recorder. If she needs to do this within her own department and her own cost, that's one thing, but to contract it out to an outside agency who has somebody else's computer, his own, this is not going to lead to any kind of ability for our community to feel secure about the voting. And I think this is a very dangerous step, and it's been alluded to by other folks that have spoken today, and I heartily recommend that we vote this down.
And I have a question. This is a former employee who just recently retired. How is it that we can give a contract? I thought we had policies that prevented that.
Chair Bronson, Chair Bronson, I'm not aware of when the individual left the employment of the county.
Well, I think we should find out.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
Thank you. My understanding from the Recorder is that Mr. Prasad, who was our database administrator for 1 year under this Recorder and 7 years under her predecessor, retired in January of this year.
So he's not eligible. He hasn't been, it's not been a year.
My understanding, again, from information that we've gotten from the Recorder, is that the proposed contract has been approved by the County Attorney's Office, as well as by Risk Management, Finance, and the Procurement Director.
It's again in violation of our code.
Could we ask Mr. Brown to address that concern, Madam Chair?
Chair Bronson, we have looked at this contract. There is no policy that's prohibitive, and there's no statutes that are prohibitive. We can look at it again if that's the request.
Well, I know we haven't brought other employees that have retired, have had to wait a year to be reemployed by us.
Chair Bronson, I believe that's true if we're rehiring them as a county employee, but if we're doing a contract separate, then I don't
thought
know that applies.
it was both, so I don't know.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Chris.
Just to reiterate, the database should be safeguarded in-house as a dedicated employee of the Recorder's Office. This should not be sent out to a consulting firm or an outside agency or an outside computer.
Chair Bronson.
Supervisor.
My understanding is that we're in the middle of a procurement for a new cloud-based database. So this is sort of like a Band-Aid to get us through with this program that we're currently using and have been using. This individual, Mr. Prasad, had been maintaining that database for Pima County for 8 years. And so it's literally just to get us through this general election, and then the procurement for the new cloud-based system is going to be in effect, and then that has a commercial system, like a commercial record management system and training. And so this is through November, and I feel like I asked questions of our county recorder. We've been assured by legal that this is not a violation of procurement, and so I'd like to go ahead and move forward. And the one other thing I wanted to add is that this is not a general fund expense. This is something that is already in the recorder's budget.
And I share Supervisor Christie's concern. This should have been in-house. Why is this happening now? Why wasn't the recorder aware of this earlier, and why couldn't we hire in-house? And I'm not casting aspersions on the vendor she wants. I have a real problem with the process.
Madam Chair, I concur with your comments. A lot of this is hearsay, and I'm not quite comfortable with the county attorney's determination on the legitimacy of this. But it is noteworthy that this item was up on the agenda, posted for some time, and the recorder is not here to address this. Now, certainly she doesn't have to, but it would seem to me something as significant as this nature, the recorder could be here to answer directly these questions. In the meantime, we've got folks circling the wagons around her when she should be here to answer these questions herself.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
I appreciate Supervisor Christie's comments. I spoke with the recorder yesterday. She is out of state and would have been here were she not out of state. I also got this information from her with regard to security. It says, rest assured that remote access to our database is secure and has been for years. Access to the internal network is secured through SSL Cisco VPN connections. The Recorder's Office on-premises Citrix application environment provides secure system access via user authentication methods and protocols. We take very seriously the security of the public information with which we have been entrusted. We've done extensive reviews of our security, including a comprehensive assessment conducted by the Department of Homeland Security last year. We have implemented 70% of the recommendations and are working to secure contracts to fulfill the remaining 30% after this year. She also pointed out that Mr. Prasad and Ms. Bowserman made reference to this during her call to the public comments, that Mr. Prasad has specific subject matter expertise and is familiar with our unique database configuration from his 8 years of service in the office. Filling the position when the need will change in 12 to 18 months is wasteful. Additionally, it will cost the county more. The scope of the contract assumed 12 hours a week and a cushion for emergencies. The average hours per week of work done by the current contractor, not not this gentleman, but the current contractor, during the previous 33 weeks is 8.3. If that trend continues, we will only use $49,000 of the $90,000 contract. This solution is the most responsible and cost-effective solution for the next year or two. Now, I agree that if the recorder were in town, that it would be prudent for her to be present herself, but it wasn't difficult for me to get this information by asking questions about the item that we had to consider today. I also wanted to point out that Mr. Prasad stepped in at the beginning of August to deal with a significant problem with not the voter database, but the records management program, and that the current contractor was not able to address it. He came in and was able to address it right away. I think this is somebody who has a demonstrated record of service to Pima County over 8 years, 7 years under the previous recorder. And this, to me, while we are in the process of migrating to a different system, is a good stopgap measure. And I do not have any security concerns based on what I heard from the recorder.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
I'd be curious to know how this gentleman was paid when he stepped in, and under what policy he was allowed to be paid. And I think it would be important and prudent that this item be continued until we can get a more direct and decisive legal opinion from the county attorney's office as to the policy of this procedure. And secondly, I would like it to be continued in addition to that for a time when the recorder can be here in person to answer these questions directly rather than through other sources.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie, is that in the form of a substitute motion?
I would make it so.
And continue till
the time.
Well, we need a date certain.
A date certain.
Our next board meeting?
Next board meeting. I'm certain that the recorder should be back in town by then, I would think.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Motion fails for lack of a second. We'll go back to the original motion.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Thank you. Just to follow up on some of the information I got about the situation we were just referring to, the recorder reports that our contracted database administrator, the current one, not Mr. Prasad, was alerted immediately and could not find a solution. We initiated a support case with Oracle through our support contract. The responses from Oracle were slow and unhelpful. In the meantime, our contracted database administrator contacted our former database administrator, Mr. Prasad, as he had done for simple advice since his retirement. Mr. Prasad had spent hours providing background and advice for free since retiring. Mr. Prasad was unable to identify the issue without being logged into our system. In the meantime, we reached out to County ITD for support, and a database administrator with familiarity with Oracle offered his services. Unfortunately, this issue required expertise with Oracle. We were all aware of the very real threat that our voter system could also fail. This would be catastrophic since we were busy processing provisional ballots to meet our statutory deadlines. Early in the morning of August 5th, day 2 of the shutdown of our customers' ability to record documents, Mr. Prasad suspected that journal files from a failed replication process during the previous several months were causing the errors in a backup of journal files. Mr. Prasad attempted to walk the contracted database administrator through the process of stopping the data guard replication procedure, but the contracted DBA was unsuccessful. This call was facilitated by our acting IT manager, Marian Chuban. Mr. Prasad said he could come into our office and access the necessary Oracle functions from his old desktop computer. He came in at 3 p.m. and was securely logged in. He stopped the data guard connection that cleared all journal entries, and within 10 minutes, our system was working again. She does say that on August 12th, 2022, Procurement Director Terry Spencer and County Administrator Jan Lesher approved a payment request to compensate Mr. Prasad for his time in resolving our critical database failure.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
the last sentence of Supervisor Scott, he was approved a payment. Is this in any violation of any county policy? That's my first question. And secondly, the narrative that Supervisor Scott just relayed to us, I find very troubling. There seems to be a lot of problems and a lot of issues and a lot of questions and concerns to the point where you gave us that great detail about all of the issues that were confronting the Recorder's Office. I think this kind of a subject matter and this kind of a program needs to be continued until we get the definitive response from the County Attorney's Office and we have the Recorder here to answer the questions directly. With all due respect, I would prefer very much to hear the elected official recite the situation and the causes and the cures rather than through secondhand information. That was a lot of trouble and a lot of issues, and I think that we jump into something like this, we're going to regret it. And I would also think that my colleagues would want all of these issues answered and addressed and cleared up just for the sake of transparency so we don't have these reoccurring again. And that could only happen by a continuation of this item.
Supervisor Christie, I did not second your motion, although I agree with your points, because I think it would fail. I think there are 3 votes to move forward, so I'm going to call the question. Roll call.
This is for approval.
Correct.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
No. By your vote of 3-2, motion carries. Moving on to hearings, Development Services, item 23. It's a type 2 conditional use, P22CU00006, TK Family LLC, East Tank Verde Road. Staff is recommending approval, and the hearing administrator recommended approval. What's the pleasure of the board? Supervisor Christie.
Madam Chair, first, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak against this particular conditional use permit? Seeing that no one is here, I would like to move that we close public hearing and that P22CU00006 TK Family LLC East Tank Verde Road take the recommendation of staff and approval subject to standard and special conditions, and the recommendation of staff for approval subject to standard and special conditions.
I'll second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the addendum agenda, we've already done item 1 and 3, so we're now on item 2, 2022 general election. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Hargrove, thank you for being here today. This basically is looking forward as the election cycle continues. There were concerns that had arisen regarding the imbalance of voter center staffing. The reports that we have is that the poll worker report, there were 784 Democrats hired, 607 Republicans, a deficiency of Republicans of 177 workers. Out of 129 vote centers, 48 were imbalanced. Imbalanced examples we have are voting centers 11, 13, and 17. Vote centers 16, 19, and 20. Vote centers 43, 74, 77, 92, 93, 127. And in those groups represented, there were absolutely no Republican poll workers, and that in vote centers 96 and 104, there were no Democrat vote centers. So my first request is, can you cite or explain to us what the laws are about balanced poll workers, political party, and where that regulation or that law comes from, and what it stipulates and says, and what the penalties could potentially be? I talk about penalties because I've also found out that up in Maricopa County they have the same issue, and there seems to be threat of litigation for that imbalance up there, and it would be nice to avoid that kind of litigation down here. So my first question is if you could explain the laws and the regulations about the necessity or the requirements of balanced poll workers, and then if you could also give us a update as we move towards the general election, what steps are being taken to correct the political affiliation and balance of vote center staffing. And I explained the numbers behind them. So again, thank you for being here, and if you could let us know what the regulations are, what the laws are, what the penalties are, and what the whole subject matter deals with.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, thank you for the question. Actually, I do have a correction. I know for sure that we had a Republican in Vote Center 77 because she volunteered to drive an hour or so away to actually serve in that vote center. You probably know her. I won't call her name, but so some of these were corrected prior to election day. So the report that you received, the initial report, there were some balancing. We did do some balancing after that to make sure that we had, at least 2 Republicans if it was a larger vote center, and a minimum of 1 for the vote center 77 is really small, and so they had about 4 people there working. And so with the inspector and then the judge of the opposite party, we felt comfortable because that was the only person we could find to go out to the nation to actually serve in that capacity.
Madam Chair, Ms. Hargrove, I don't interrupt, and forgive me for doing so, but if you could give us a little illumination on the laws and the requirements and things, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I do not know offhand the exact statute, but it is in Title 16 of the Arizona Revised Statutes, and we are required to have equal representation of the 2 largest political parties in the county for vote centers, or precincts. And I did not, and I have not, and I have to go and look. I did not find any penalties for not having that covered, but it is actually for the protection, of course, of the voters that we have equitable representation. So I will not say that each vote center will have equal representation. They will have equitable representation, meaning that the inspector will be of one party, the marshal will be of a different party, and then we will have judges of the same party of the inspector, judges of the opposite party of the inspector, and then we will have some clerks.
And this complies with all the regulations of equal voting political party representation?
Yes, sir, it does.
You don't know of any penalties if this is not complied with?
Not off the top of my head, no, sir. I would have to look that up.
And if you're going to provide that information, I would ask that you do. Could you also give us an updated report that you just stipulated that I'm quoting is not the most current? Could you provide us with the most current?
Absolutely. You don't mean for the primary, right? Or you mean going into the general election?
Going into the general.
Yes, sir. So we will have agenda item to bring that forward to you in the next couple of meetings where you guys will approve the actual vote center representation. So that will be coming forward to the Board of Supervisors for approval.
And now your discussion on addressing the imbalance, what plans do you have to address those imbalances?
So we have been working on that since the primary election. I'm working with the Republican Party. So Shelley Keyes, the chair, she sent out a extensive list of Republican workers, and she also sent me a list of individuals that live in cells in the nation in that area that would be willing to work there. So the majority of our vote centers are complete, but we are still definitely working on the cells area to make sure that we have equitable representation there.
And that is a focus of your department?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, that is absolutely a focus. We are actively working on that.
And do you have a time frame when you think this might be achieved, or that you would like it to be achieved?
Yes, sir, I've asked for a report by this Friday so that I can review it, and before we bring it to the Board of Supervisors to make sure that everything is correct.
Okay. And then you will also find out about the penalties and any kind of exposure legally that the county might be incurring?
Yes, sir, I will do that.
Madam Chair, I think that answers my questions, and I appreciate you doing so. Ms.
And I appreciate your professionalism, and you're staying on top of things, and you just got here, so you had quite the transition.
You're welcome. Supervisor Christie, Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, you did have one other question, and it was about supplies.
Oh, that's right.
Can I just kind of give you a little bit of update on that?
Let me read my question. What is the current status of the additional materials identified by the elections director and staff as needed, such as the printer carts? The printers were too heavy to move, and we required carts to transport them around the voting centers. At least 3 e-poll books were found to be needed, and there were only 2 at the voting centers. Various supplies and items were identified, and we're hoping that you are able to identify what those are and be able to provide them for the general election. So basically what the current issues are with the supply lack, I should say.
Yes, Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie. So I'll start with the easy one first, which is the e-poll books. And yes, we did have to reallocate e-poll books, so there wasn't the 3rd e-poll book in some of the vote centers, which we use for the special situations table. I have contracted with the vendor to rent 80 additional e-poll books for the general election so that we can cover that and provide any additional to vote centers that need them, as well as any backups. So that part is taken care of. We should have delivery of those by the end of September. In addition, we will also receive the thermal printers that we talked about when I first got here that we've forgotten about. Those should be arriving as well the end of September. As far as the printer carts are concerned. So we did have a conversation, my staff and I, we're continually reviewing, and we found that the printer issue with the tables was not as widespread as we thought it was. And it was not fiscally responsible to temporarily purchase carts that we would have to replace, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. So, and the other issue is that the size of the ballot is different from this election. So the last election, it was 8.5 by 14. This election, it is a 19-inch ballot. So it's not a standard size paper tray for printer cards.
Wow.
So I am confident that, those few vote centers that had the issue with the printer having to slide it forward, we won't have that issue. We will address it in training and make sure they understand, and the others worked fine as far as not having to move it on a table.
And the hardware will be there to back up all these changes in the ballots and things of that nature?
Yes, sir. We've already received the extension for the paper trays. They've already been installed on the printers, and we're testing those now.
I will look forward to the information that you'll be providing. And one last question. Are you sleeping any better these nights?
Actually, Supervisor Christie, I sleep very well. Yes, thank you.
Nothing's keeping you up now?
Absolutely nothing's keeping me up.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Hargrove.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Thank you. Ms. Hargrove, we've received the full after-action report, and the last section is titled Key Issues Learned. There are 3 items dealing with training, communication between the office and the vote centers to provide adequate support, and then the second one Those were the first and the third. The second one was addressed earlier in the meeting. It says the Elections Department better understands how the e-poll books communicate with each other and other vote centers. The office will put a plan in place to better monitor the touchpad and Delta file activity during the general election. Is there anything that you can add to that key learning? And if not today, is that something you could share with the board at a later date?
Yes, sir. Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott. I can briefly respond to that. So as far as the planning for the Delta files, we've had extensive conversations with the vendor. So the plan is to make sure that we have as many downloaded prior to sending them out, and require the Monday night setup of the actual poll book so that they can then download the rest of the Delta files before election morning. And we won't have as many out there. We've already discussed it, so we will not produce as many Delta files prior to the election, so that there is no lag at that point. So election morning, when they open their poll books, they will be receiving almost real time the Delta files from vote centers.
And that item was addressed in your report, and I appreciate you restating it. Do you anticipate any other updates from the vendor in terms of touchpad and Delta file activity that would help to inform our procedures prior to the general election?
Yeah, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, we have meetings every week, and we're continually discussing that. ITD is normally in the meeting with me, and they're asking those technical questions that I do not know to ask. We are devising a plan between ITD and elections to make sure that we have that dedicated person to actually watch these touchpads during the day, as well as they can watch another system to see where there may be any connectivity issues. So we are developing a plan as we go along. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Hargrove. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, one quick comment.
Okay.
In the after-action report which we received, there was also a after-action report from a couple of members of the EIC that was accompanying the reports. I'm hoping that when those reports go before the EIC, that there will be an opportunity at that EIC meeting to address the issues that the commission members raised, and that after that is addressed, that it could be incorporated into the after-action report, including those commission members' comments on the, I believe it's the 14th? The 14th. So if you could, it would be good to get all of that cleared behind us and to have those items addressed that the EIC commissioners raise, either, well, not only either, but at both the EIC meeting, and then, which is next Friday, and then the next board meeting, which is the 14th. It's not the next. October 4th. If you could make sure that those are all addressed, that way we got it cleared. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion and there's no objection, this meeting stands adjourned.